Today, we've got something that's going to open some eyes. So where in America is it hardest to get a nomination to West Point?
That's right, sir. We've analyzed data on 69 of the most competitive congressional districts in the country for West Point. These are places where students are battling it out for nominations, and competition can be tougher than acceptance to many Ivy League schools in these areas.
Yeah, and that's not random. Really geography, wealth, military presence, and even politics in a little bit can shape who has the hardest path. And today we're going to name some of these congressional districts. Illinois 10 with Representative Brad Schneider, Virginia 10, and New York 18 with Representative Pat Ryan, and many more.
We'll also look at who's missing. For example, San Francisco doesn't really show up at all, and we'll tell you why.
Let's talk about what the ground rules are in the nomination system itself. So let's start with the basics here. Every congressional district in America gets the same number of nominations for West Point, which is 15. So that means a rural district or a large rural district in Nebraska and a wealthy suburb of New York, which may have less of a geographic area, both technically get the same shot on paper, meaning there's 15 of those slots and the population of both of those districts is about the same. So no matter where you are in the country, each of your congressional representatives get 15.
But you said the same shot, and really that's, in practice, the number of applicants per district varies widely. In Illinois 7, which covers the west side of Chicago with Rep. Danny Davis, there may only be a handful of applicants.
Yeah, so then compare that to Illinois 10 with Representative Brad Schneider, where there was over 12 nominations for the class of 2029. Now, that's the heart of this research. Some districts are just plain harder. Schneider is harder than Davis. And why is that?
Well, the first big pattern is definitely income. The average household income across those 69 districts that are the most competitive, it's about $100,000 compared to the national average of around $80,000.
Right. So, that's $20,000 more in household income from more competitive districts than the national average. So, it's $20,000 more that a family is making. So that's a big indicator, right? Is socioeconomic and household income. So let's look at, for example, Virginia 11, which is Jerry Connolly's district, which is Northern Virginia. So a lot of people who work in the district work for the government, people who work, in supporting the government, lobbyists, all the things that are going on in the DC area. That district has the household income is $158,000. And sure enough, this district, VA 11, is in the data set.
Yeah, for good reason. Anywhere in the DMV, pretty much, you're going to be in a pretty competitive environment. Same story in New Jersey 7, represented by Representative Tom Keene. That district, part of New York Metro, has a median income of $133,000, and that is on the list as well of the top most competitive districts.
Yeah. And so the trend is metro concentration, right? The DC metro area has multiple districts on the list, like Virginia 10 and Virginia 11, with Representative Connolly.
And the New York Metro brings in New York 17 and New York 18 with Representatives Lawyer and Ryan. The LA Metro contributes 47 with Representative Min, and California 36 with Rep. Liu. And Dallas suburbs show up as well, with CIS 24 being one of the most competitive with Representative Van Duyn.
So these aren't random, Trish. They're big, wealthy, competitive hubs in the country. These just really jump out on the data set for us.
There's really 4 main types of archetypes of what the district looks like. And the first one is the wealthy suburban metro.
So wealthy suburban metro, and we kind of talked about that previously. These areas combine affluence, really great schools, powerhouse athletics, because remember, 25% of all service academy, meaning West Point, the Air Force Academy, and the Naval Academy, are going to be drawing their candidates from really good athletic areas. So obviously places like Texas 24, huge powerhouse athletics, which is going to get a lot of good candidates that are really good at athletics. And then families who know how to build competitive applications to the service academy, SAT scores, and getting those whole candidate scores really high.
And the second archetype is the military adjacent with high competition. So any place that's close to a military base, potentially also higher affluence as well most of the time. So Colorado 5 would be a great example here. With Colorado Springs, you have Fort Carson, you have Peterson, and Space Force Base, and then you have the Air Force Academy too. California 49, right? North County, San Diego, near Camp Pendleton and Navy bases, lots of Navy influence there. And finally, another example on the other coast is Florida 1 with Pensacola, with the Naval Air Station Pensacola right there. So not necessarily all Army bases, and sometimes you don't really need an Army base for the military propensity for service to be there and for students to be interested in West Point. But since this conversation is specifically tailored to West Point, it's worth mentioning. And
Yeah.
these districts produce a lot of applicants at very high rates because military families and veterans in the area just fuel awareness for students and families.
Yeah, and a lot of those individuals may be military kids of retirees. Now, of course, they're going to apply under the presidential nomination category, but the service academies also recommend that you apply to your congressional district. So these are going to be candidates that are going to be applying for multiple nominations, but they're definitely going to be applying to their member of the House. And so that's going to fuel higher numbers that are going to be applying in those districts versus districts that are way far from any military base or where there's not a large military retiree community. The third archetype is high achieving legacy districts. So these are districts that have always kind of produced people for the academy. Now, what you'll see with these, when we say legacy, these tend to be geographically closer to West Point, that have always produced a lot, that there's high awareness of West Point itself. And I imagine that would be the same for the Naval Academy around the DC area, or around Maryland, or for maybe the Air Force Academy out in Colorado and the West, where there may be more familiarity with the Air Force Academy. So let's talk about those districts with high achieving legacy districts. So New York 18, Pat Ryan. This is Hudson Valley right next to West Point. Lots of alumni, families, and people like that close to West Point. It's going to be more difficult. Connecticut 4, Jim Hines, is Western Connecticut suburbs with a big culture of sending kids to the academies and has the most nominations on our list. So if you're a Connecticut 4, that's a tough one there. Then Pennsylvania 06, Chrissy Houlihan, that's Philadelphia suburbs, where the local high schools have strong academy pipelines. Now, what we're talking about here, if you've noticed, it's that kind of 95 corridor that goes from, DC, starts in DC, goes all the way up through Philadelphia, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, and then up through Massachusetts. It's kind of this area, particularly around the high median income, that just really attracts people to, I think, all the service academies, but particularly West Point. And we don't have the data set on the Naval Academy, but it's probably the same with the Naval Academy too. But those high achieving districts are really important here.
Yeah. And then we have some other just really competitive hubs. Again, these are certain areas of the country where we always notice higher trends towards military service and a lot of applicants. So Georgia 7, North Atlanta suburbs are right there, growing affluence and increasing competitiveness. Maryland 8 with Representative Raskin. The suburbs of DC with high academics and a median income of over 125,000. And another example would be Massachusetts with Representative Catherine Clark. Boston suburbs for her district with strong feeder schools. The really important thing here to also note is that when we talk about academy applications and getting into West Point, we're looking locally first and competing locally in your district. And then we think about competing at large on the national waiting list. So knowing and understanding your district is so critical. And we can help you discover that information with a strategy session. If you would like to sit down with myself or Lieutenant Colonel Kirkland for ROTC scholarships, we can walk you through the entire process, what your district looks like, how to compare based on your district analysis, and really give you that full picture and strategy of how to move forward and really what to focus and prioritize for your application.
When you look at missing districts, so there might be this question, well, what districts are absent from this list? The first one I would say, Trish, is San Francisco area, meaning the Bay Area of California. So that's represented by Nancy Pelosi and in Connecticut 11. That doesn't really show up, even though the income is high, mainly because there's very little military presence in that area, or there used to be more, but there's not as much anymore. There's fewer traditional athletics pipelines and a culture that values Stanford, Berkeley, Silicon Valley over, like, say, West Point. So there's probably less propensity for military service, as well as the geographic distance perhaps also ties in with San Francisco area.
I do think it's very important to note that the San Francisco area is extremely competitive for other service academies, just not West Point. Very, very critical to note. If you're applying to another service academy, you should not apply that same standard. But if you look at West Point applications and compare San Francisco to Los Angeles, for California, 47 and 36 are on the list. Why? There's a lot of military bases in the region, aerospace influence, a huge population, and powerhouse suburban schools as well.
Yep. Those are more in Orange County than, say, LA County or, say, Riverside or San Bernardino County. It tends to be more concentrated in the Orange County area. And then, I mean, the same story with Chicago 10, which is Brad Schneider. That makes the list. Affluent suburb, Great Lakes Naval Air Station nearby. So that's northern Chicago. But Illinois 07, which is Danny Davis, covers the west side. Lower income, less military presence, and fewer feeder programs.
So what does this mean for students and parents? If you're in a district like Virginia 11 or Texas 24, you need to tap every edge, top grades, athletics leadership, again, back to the scholar athlete leader profile, and a bulletproof application, really making sure that you are doing everything you can to position yourself to be one of those top 200 students that's pulled off of the national waiting list.
But if you're in a district like Illinois 7 or Arkansas 4, you're going to face much less competition. They don't even fill 15 slots. That doesn't mean necessarily the standards are lower to get in, but your odds of getting a nomination are much, much higher.
Definitely. And when we think about this from a pure numbers game, if you're in one of those lower competition districts like Arkansas 4, there's always the chance that a candidate could come into the picture with a 1600 SAT, captain of the football team, president of your class. And even if there's only 2 people applying in your district and it's that other person, you're not going to win the vacancy, assuming that it's a competitive nomination. So just because you're in a lower competition district does not mean that you should give up on pushing your whole person score as high as possible. But awareness is key, and students should understand the playing field. Families need to know, are you in a competitive district or not? Because nominations are about more than individual achievement. They're about geography, economics, and culture.
Trish, to sum it up, the toughest places to get a nomination are wealthy suburban metro areas like Illinois 10, Brad Schneider, military-adjacent hubs like Colorado 5, Doug Lamborn, and legacy-heavy districts like New York 18, Pat Ryan.
The easiest are the rural, less affluent areas or low military exposure districts that aren't on this list of 69 high competition districts, but West Point still requires excellence. Again, this is very specific to West Point. If you're considering applying for a nomination to the Air Force Academy or the Naval Academy, this list looks a little bit different. There are a lot of commonalities, but it could be different. So just keep that in mind.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Geography of Service Academy competition. Here at Gain Service Academy Mission ROTC Scholarship Consulting, we stay at the forefront of understanding this process and giving you information that you won't hear anyplace else. And so this analysis for you was one where we really wanted to look at this in deep detail to determine really what those districts are that were more competitive. So we hope you enjoyed this episode, and please like or subscribe to our YouTube channel to be updated when new episodes come out, Trish. And so until next time.